it safe, especially for children. Australia's eSafety Commissioner has developed 3 core design principles to minimize harms and ensure transparency and accountability are built in. It's time for our closing keynote address with a fierce advocate for online safety, Julie Inman Grant, Australia's eSafety Commissioner. In this role, Julie leads the world's first government regulatory agency committed to its citizens safer online. Julie has extensive experience in nonprofit and government sectors and spent 2 decades working in senior public policy safety roles in the tech industry at Microsoft, Twitter, and Adobe. Julie, honestly, I have deja vu since I have done this introduction once before as well. And it's always just amazes me your support for the cause. The commissioner's career began in Washington, D.C., working in the U.S. Congress and nonprofit sector before taking on the role at Microsoft. Julie's experience at Microsoft spanned 17 years, serving as one of the company's first and the longest-standing government relation professional, ultimately in the role of Global Director for Safety and Privacy Policy Outreach. At Twitter, she set up and drove the company's policy, safety, and philanthropy program across Australia, New Zealand, and Southeast Asia. As a commissioner, Julie plays an important global role as chair for the Child Safety Alliance Technical Working Group and as a board member of the We Protect Global Alliance. The commissioner also serves on the World Economic Forum's Global Coalition for Digital Safety and on their XRSI Governance Steering Committee on building and defining the Metaverse. Under her leadership, eSafety has joined forces with the White House Gender Policy Council and Government of Denmark on the Global Partnership for Action on Gender-Based Harassment. The commissioner was recently named one of Australia's most influential women by the Australian Financial Review and a leading Australian in foreign affairs by Sydney Morning Herald. In 2022, World Economic Forum and a political appointed commissioner as one of the Agile 50, the world's most influential leaders in revolutionizing government. So let me stop here and let's go back to the future, intentional design for a safer metaverse. Julie, please take it away.
Thank you so much. I think my avatar is blushing. Hello, everyone. It's really great to be here with you again as we wrap up another impactful Metaverse Safety Week. And what an excellent announcement from the team. I want to thank you, Kavya, for just getting it and for being such an incredible advocate for safety in the metaverse. And she's got an amazing team around her. I've got to give Christina Podnar a shout out for being so awesome at the Family Online Safety Institute panel in DC a couple of weeks ago, and having other incredible speakers like Louis Rosenberg, Kat Wallace, and others is really gratifying. And of course, this new immersive environment that we're all grappling with, at times literally, will naturally be a beacon for children. And today I'm going to focus on how we can make it safer for them. But first, I'd like to zoom out a little to address the overarching theme of the week, safety. I'd also note, having listened with great interest to the previous panel and the conversation about privacy design, that I do think we have to think about digital trust in terms of having 3 legs of the stool, with privacy, security, and safety representing each leg. And to the extent one leg is shorter, the whole stool will likely fall over. And frankly, in my 30 years working in this space, safety has always been given short shrift vis-a-vis the others. And I hope that's changing with the emergence of the metaverse. So again, as you said, the metaverse is indeed no longer science fiction. It is reality, even if virtual reality, courtesy of the chicken waffle. And reality, as we know, is something very different from fantasy. As adults, it's incumbent upon us to remember this fact, because technology, no matter how advanced, never changed that. Now, the recent wave of layoffs at major tech companies has also shown us once again that they are part of an industry just like any other, subject to the same realities. And in my view, tech should be treated just like other industries, especially as we hurtle headlong toward Web 3.0 in the metaverse, where the potential for both good and bad outcomes is greatly magnified. In practical terms, this means demanding standards of transparency, accountability, and safety similar to those that we expect from, say, an essential utility. In this presentation, I'm going to share with you 3 basic principles tech companies can use to achieve this. Nowadays, I think it's very difficult to argue that tech is any different from consumer goods, for instance. And I think that the era of technological exceptionalism is definitely coming to an end. There are those who continue to maintain that this construct should remain. For them, tech is hardly an industry at all, more like some grand liberating project too far out at the cutting edge of innovation to be restricted by such mundane considerations as safety. Treating tech like a normal business, so the argument goes, would be like regulating philosophy, physics, artistic expression, or freedom itself. Idealism may have been defensible back in the early formative days of the internet. Experience has clearly shown that it is grounded in a false reality. Today, it is fantasy at best, and a dangerous one at that. Conceive of the metaverse as a 3-dimensional space users inhabit rather than as a 2-dimensional medium for distributing content. Framing technology companies as utilities makes even more sense. If we think about how some of the larger platforms in the metaverse today serve as app stores or gatekeepers of the immersive world, then they look much more like critical infrastructure. In that case, we may begin to think of the metaverse as a territory or municipality, a city, if you will, on a hill, much so often is rendered in its early iterations. Utilities, tech companies, and the services they provide become part of the urban fabric, similar to infrastructure. And just like the internet, cities have brought humanity untold benefits. We also know they hold dangers. Few of us here would willingly move into a housing development which drained waste directly into the street. Or would we want to see public spaces without street lighting, things without fire exits, intersections without traffic signals, bridges without guardrails. Right. These things protect us from harms, urban squalor, disease, mischance, and the mistakes, carelessness, or outright criminality of others. Regulated by standards and rules, invested in, planned for, and enforced where necessary by governments. They all rely on one fundamental input: time. Where any piece of infrastructure is built, it is designed. Whole professions exist to ensure that safety is the heart of that urban planning process. Design is what makes our modern cities livable. Safety, we believe a similar approach can also make the metaverse a positive, safe, and if really desired, livable, including for children. Mindful, intentional planning and assessment of risks, we can avoid the kinds of harms we've seen proliferate in Web 3.0, harms my investigators deal with every day. Foundational elements are laid out in our Safety by Design initiative, and we've been working with industry to apply it across a range of online environments for the past 4 years. Lifetime in a digital project lifecycle. I'll return to this shortly, but before I do, let me zoom in just a little further and talk briefly about how we got to where we are today. It wasn't all that long ago that the internet was in its infancy and the world was still very much in an analog state. It was a time of great promise. It was also a time when many thought overregulation would be an impediment of innovation and growth, and I was one of those people. Companies were moving fast and breaking things and wanted only one thing from governments, and that was to stay out of their way. For the most part, governments around the world were happy to oblige. I know this time well, having worked at tech policy ground zero starting in 1995, don't do the math, as a young Washington, D.C. lobbyist. Of course, it was the 1990s, so I came to D.C. with big ideals, shoulder pads, and even bigger hair. I found myself working for an unassuming guy named Bill at a certain software company called Microsoft. At that time, Microsoft, AOL, Novell, and Netscape were the big end of town, looking to the future through our rosy techno-utopian glasses. We only had eyes for the potential this online revolution would bring. But with rapid advances in technology and power just around the corner, the internet we were preparing for would quickly outpace our imaginations. Around this time, a bold new vision of a completely free and open internet was being championed by an American poet, cyber libertarian, and songwriter for the Grateful Dead, John Perry Barlow, who penned the famous Declaration of Independence of Cyberspace. Barlow focused on the great promise this new world held for humanity, while giving little thought to how it might be potentially misused to harm others, save for this one line: where there are real conflicts, where there are wrongs, we will identify them and address them by our means. Now, I find this line compelling because this was effectively what the tech firms were arguing for in Washington. Now, a lot of Barlow's idealism is gone now, but some of the mistaken assumptions that supported his argument live on and continue to influence public discourse about the internet to this day. And I have to say, I had the rare opportunity to debate some of these concepts with John in London back in 1997 at an expat Thanksgiving party. Time and again, we've let our eagerness to reap the promised benefits of new technologies blind us to their potential pitfalls. True, the advances we've seen in our lifetime have delivered immense advantages that would not otherwise have existed. We should celebrate them and the others yet to come, but we cannot ignore the downsides. It's time this unvarnished idealism of the internet was laid to rest. We also know that when you have people in the frame, there is potential for malfeasance, just as there is in the real world. The first government regulator in the world dedicated to protecting its citizens online, eSafety is acutely aware of what can go wrong. In the last 12 months alone, our teams have investigated many thousands of instances of abuse perpetrated against children and adults online. And these investigators have removed many thousands more of the most growing. Report image-based abuse, colloquially known as revenge porn, but we don't use that terminology, increased 55% this year. And that's on the back of a 600% increase over the pandemic. Reports of children's cyberbullying have also increased 65% and are growing more targeted and violent. These are only a drop in the ocean of harms that we know exist across the World Wide Web. There's one reason we're pleased to see a growing number of government bodies around the world empowered with a similar mandate to our own. And last month in Washington, D.C., we launched the Global Online Safety Regulators Network, created to enhance collaboration and pave the way for a more coherent international approach. Along with Australia's own Online Safety Act, there are now several important pieces of legislation globally designed to promote safety online and to hold providers of digital services to account. Include the UK's proposed Online Safety Bill, Ireland's Online Safety and Media Regulation Bill, and reform work underway in Canada, New Zealand, and Singapore. And of course, the recently enacted Digital Services Act deserves special mention. This is a real inflection moment in Europe and the world, and a milestone we're celebrating globally. In part to these developments, we have an incredible opportunity right now to learn from past mistakes and implement policies that promote safety, privacy, security, inclusivity, participation, and the full range of human virtual rights. We have plenty reason to be optimistic. Like previous iterations of the internet, Web 3.0 and the metaverse have the potential for enormous good. Imagine future medical students, for example, studying and dissecting virtual human bodies. Forces in Australia and elsewhere are already using mixed reality to simulate complex medical scenarios while still allowing trainees to interact with real-world objects. Metaverse could provide quality of life for those with disabilities, offering opportunities to access sensory experiences otherwise unknown to them. Children, the educational possibilities are immense. Imagine taking students back in time to experience ancient Rome, or even further back to walk amongst the dinosaurs 70 million years ago. Importantly, we're also seeing innovative use for immersive technologies to address the needs of children from diverse communities and to preserve and promote culture. Highlighting the good, we must also consider the bad. Alongside some high-profile reports of adults experiencing incidents of abuse in the metaverse, safety is also aware of harms suffered by children. Research shows about 1 in 5 young Australians who've engaged in the metaverse have experienced something that made them feel unsafe. Creating hyper-realistic environments, immersive technologies could increase the impact of these kinds of experiences, including assaults and abuse. For example, VR games incorporating graphic themes may evoke a much stronger emotional response in children, including potentially longer-lasting feelings of fear, anxiety, and trauma. The Institute of Engineering and Technology recently highlighted that some existing VR apps can enable users to simulate intimate contact with school children, normalizing and desensitizing them to various forms of sexual abuse, coercion, and assault. There may be new harms that we can't yet fully envision, and in my 30 years in working in this space, you can never underestimate the creative ability of humans to misuse technology. The kind of data extracted and used by immersive technologies may play a role here too, and will be important to understand. When eSafety started 7 years ago, there was no playbook for regulating online safety and dealing with complaints. So we've had to fill in the pages as we've gone along. And our approach is multi-pronged and includes a model that we call the 3 Ps. The first P is prevention. Through our extensive research, education, and awareness raising programs, we strive to prevent online harms from happening in the first place. As you can see, our online safety gift guide for 2021 and 22 launched a couple of weeks ago is one small example of this work. This year, it focuses on immersive technologies and provides guidance for parents and gift givers. The idea is to keep them alert and aware rather than alarmed, so that they can make informed purchasing decisions and consider co-participating in the metaverse with their kids. Second P is protection. Safety operates world-first schemes to protect Australians from online harm, including child cyberbullying, image-based abuse, and a new adult cyber abuse scheme. We target illegal and restricted content online, such as child sexual exploitation material, and material that promotes or advocates terrorist or criminal acts. Australia's Online Safety Act, which I mentioned earlier, is enabling new regulatory measures, including the basic online safety expectations. The expectations set out reasonable steps which online service providers must take to protect its users. Under the Act, eSafety can require companies to report on how they are meeting them. We will be very significant on this tomorrow, and we will continue to perform where appropriate to improve transparency and accountability. And we have found that transparency that have recently been submitted by industry associations to address the most harmful online content like pro-terror and child sexual exploitation material. I'm currently considering these codes and whether they provide appropriate community safeguards. If the draft codes do not meet the statutory test, I am able to determine industry standards, and this covers 8 sectors of the technology ecosystem, including devices and software that can and may be used in the metaverse context. But regulation on its own can only achieve so much. We often talk about playing a game of whack-a-mole, or in our case, whack-a-troll. And this is where the third P comes in, around proactive and systemic change. We need the technology industry itself, with all of its collective brilliance, to join with us in building a safer metaverse from the ground up. We're aiming to bring about a fundamental change in how companies design, develop, and deploy their products with safety at the core. We call this approach safety by design, and I now like to share with you 3 key principles for achieving it. Principle 1, firstly, service provider responsibility. While emerging technologies amplify opportunities for users, they also amplify risks. Safety should never fall solely on humans or their avatars. Providers themselves must make every attempt to ensure online harms are understood, addressed, and assessed in service design and provision. Great to see so many technology companies investing in innovative hybrids of human moderation with advanced machine learning and AI tools. This innovative approach needs to be expanded on and applied to immersive tech, including new and experimental technologies like haptics and devices that might smell, touch, or even taste. Second principle is user empowerment and autonomy. Should always respect the dignity of users. This means designing and maintaining in ways that preserve and respond to fundamental human rights. Crucial to this is understanding technology can exacerbate inequality, leading to greater harms for some more than others. Real-time immersive environments where content, conduct, and contact concerns coalesce will require platforms and stakeholders from across the digital ecosystem working proactively to minimize harms and support user empowerment and autonomy. Features that create boundaries and enable real-time reporting of abuse are essential, perhaps with functionality more like an immediate eject button rather than simple pathways to a content moderator. We recently announced a parental control center and our Horizon Worlds Safe Zone, which represents great first steps. We know much more needs to be done. For example, parents and carers need information and updates as technologies evolve. Principle 3. The third key principle is transparency and accountability. These are literally the hallmarks of a robust approach to user safety. They are linked and should act together as a catalyst for a race to the top in terms of user safety. Accountability cannot be selective. Companies must be radically transparent about the risks they know exist and to actively address these risks. To also disclose measures they are taking to address them. And they need to share data about the uptake and efficacy of these safety tools. If they do not, Safety can issue notices under Australia's basic online safety expectations to explicitly request this information. In recent research, again, the IET identified 4 key areas of focus for platform governments in immersive environments: individual, community, platform, and government. These each have a potential role to play in upholding transparency and accountability. So it's great to see events like Metaverse Safety Week gaining traction with a broad range of stakeholders. And the team at XRSI is doing such an incredible job and moving this important safety, privacy, and security work forward. And this is where we all set meaningful steps in the right direction together. Now let's consider these principles as a blueprint for a safer metaverse. They're quite removed from the Declaration of Independence of Cyberspace penned by John Perry Barlow. His more memorable songs for the Grateful Dead, in fact, was their 1980 hit, Feel Like a Stranger. It's all about throwing caution to the wind in pursuit of love, which feels, Barlow tells us, like running a red light. There ain't no point in looking behind us. Romance couldn't exist without an element of fantasy, and there will always be a role in life for idealism. There is a good starting point for safety, especially not for our children. Looking back, enduring power of reality to manifest certain basic truths about the market and human nature has been on stark display over the past few decades. Have a responsibility to learn from how Web 2.0 and its social consequences have played out. Next phase could bring great benefits, but let's not run any more red lights in getting there. Design may not be so sexy, but it offers a safer way forward. It's made our modern cities livable and can do the same for the metaverse. Let's build a place we would all be pleased to inhabit, at least for a while. Thank you. I don't think I figured out how to curtsy or bow.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I wonder if we can take any questions. Should we take are you okay to take a couple of questions?
Sure, happy to.
Great. To ask questions, please click on hand raise question, and I will patch you in right away to ask Julie a question. I have a question. Laura, you are patched in.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can.
Awesome. Commissioner, thank you for your time this evening. I'm just curious, in your experience, to what extent things that are happening in the real world affect potential risks or dangers online? The policies that are driving behaviors in real life or economic conditions that would drive increased risks of violence or other harms online?
I mean, I think that's a great question. I think there's direct interdependence. I said in my time in social media, and I saw it very starkly when I was at Twitter, in many ways, social media and certainly the metaverse really reflect the ills and the sad underbelly of society. And so when there are challenges in society, we certainly saw this play out during the pandemic as well. We saw huge spikes in all forms of abuse online. And that makes sense because everybody was online and people were feeling a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. There was a lot of conflict. There was a lot of misinformation. We all saw it playing out in terms of the conflict and the lack of civil discourse that played out around things like lockdowns and COVID vaccines and the like. And I think, sadly, we're seeing this this polarization playing out in many different ways. And some of it's driven by ideology. But on the converse, we're also seeing that when we normalize things like online hate, whether it's racial abuse or misogyny, in the open, that can normalize those behaviors. And I think we can all think of behaviors where we've seen online harms spill over into real harms. If you look at the Center for Countering Digital Hates in Celosphere recent report, you see that playing out. We saw that, of course, with the Uvalde shooter and the Plymouth shooter last year. So they're very interdependent, and that's why I think it should be a goal to be addressing these societal and cultural ills, obviously in the real world, because that's where it starts. This is all rooted in human behavior and malfeasance, but we also have to tackle it in the online and virtual worlds too.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes mutually reinforcing.
Thank you.
Fantastic, Ryan.
Thank you.
You're up next. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Laura.
Sure. My question is about healthcare, and to the extent you're looking to healthcare to help inform what would be considered safety. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of classic things like cyberbullying and stuff that we know about, but I'm working a little bit with Johns Hopkins and have my own pediatric VR healthcare company, and we're pretty heavily looking into unique things that are unique about being in VR in particular, where people could be harmed by certain types of design or certain types of bad intentions. And I'm just wondering if you have looked at, communicating with VR healthcare professionals or looked at commissioning more research or helping to be involved around, things that are unique about VR that could be harmful to people. I mean, we're looking inside a healthcare uh, context, but certainly everything we're studying could be applied in any context in virtual reality or XR or the metaverse. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Would love to have a conversation with you offline. Of course, one of the things that we're trying to uncover is what is the impact on online harms. I know I just was listening with interest to the last panel, and one of the speakers was talking about physical harms and then online harms. There are still people out there that that don't think that the online harms or the mental health degradation that can be experienced online is significant, and we know it is. And of course, what we've all been saying here is that with high sensory and hyper-realistic experiences, the potential trauma and the visceral nature of that impact could be greater. Now, we've worked directly with an organization called Safe Work Australia, and they have designated online abuse as a psychosocial hazard. So we've worked with them in terms of developing standards and duty of care for employers. I mean, we know that being online is no longer optional. And we also know that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, those who identify as LGBTQI+, or from diverse backgrounds, including women, receive targeted online hate at twice the national average. And a lot of this is designed to silence voices, and it has an impact, and it entrenches inequality, as I said earlier. I love the idea about working with healthcare providers, because I also feel that the body of research globally is very mixed. And you see a lot of people who work in who tend to be more anti-technology and working in the psychological space that draw a direct causal link between self-harm and ill mental health to technology use, when I think it's much more complex and nuanced than that. I think for many young people in particular, the online world in VR could provide a lot of great therapeutic benefits and a lot of sense of connection and exploration. So I'd love to explore that with you, because I do think there are a lot in the healthcare professional, mental health, but also GPs. They're talking to parents all the time, and I think they'd be a really important vector in terms of getting this preventive information out and making sure it's medically and scientifically based and answered. Sure, in touch. I'd love to hear more about what you're doing.
Amazing. Thank you, Julie. And Ryan, if you want to respond, or you're welcome to. We can hear you.
Sure.
Okay, if you can hear me. Yeah, I was just going to say, it's kind of like you were talking about a city. We're looking at like standards for when you design some stairs or you design a building, how thick does the floor have to be? How high is the rise and on the stairs, or what are, certain, so applying that into how you design an environment in VR, for example, there's things you can do to make things more appealing or intuitive, but we're trying to look into things that designers could do that actually could cause harm, or like if there's no horizon visible, does that cause people vertigo? Or should we make it so there's always a horizon, and should we set limits on contrast and lighting and stuff? So we're actually interested in almost direct physical harm that can occur, more subtle things like
Amazing.
they're talking about things. Oh, sorry, do I need to, am I going on too long?
Oh, but I think you're right to talk about the scaffolding, and that's why so many governments are. I mean, that's where the safety by design principles come in. I didn't mention that we've developed risk assessment tools for both startups and for enterprises, so that companies can actively be thinking about not only how might their different features or elements be misused, but we did this in conjunction with a number of companies, and it surfaces up innovative best practice. Yes, we have to be building the scaffolding in now, and this sounds strange as a regulator. A lot of people want to move to regulating the metaverse right away. I don't think we can regulate what we don't totally know what it's going to look like. But where I think our opportunity is now is in this shaping of the future and the design phase, and learning from the past, and frankly imagining future harms to get ahead of those creative miscreants, if you will.
Absolutely. And Julie, so Laura and Ryan both serve as XRSI advisors, amazing, gracious advisors who donate their time freely, just like you have. I'm so grateful to you for contributing to Metaverse Safety second year in a row. Yeah, just truly grateful. If you have any final thoughts, else I will make just one other announcement, which is quite relevant to what Ryan just asked about tomorrow.
I would just thank you all for making this such an important part of the dialogue, and for being such advocates. You know, sometimes it just takes a really dedicated group of humans, and it is human driven to really make a difference. And XRSI and you personally, Kavya, are doing that. So thank you, and thank you for understanding and getting it, and embracing the work that we do. That bolsters us along, and it does need to be a joined up effort across borders, across sectors, if we really are going to shape the metaverse to realize its full potential.
Absolutely. We are in this together, and tomorrow we will return and resume Metaverse Safety Week with the focus on what we just touched on, medical XR and immersive healthcare. Our theme is risks and opportunities of immersive healthcare. Immersive technologies offer many advantages for medical applications, ranging from treatments, coordinated assisted surgeries, virtual medicine, and rehabilitation, leading to a revolution in the healthcare ecosystem. When it comes to the risks and opportunities associated with the metaverse, the safety and privacy of patients must remain a priority. With that objective, a credible, diverse, and accomplished network of healthcare professionals, regulatory experts, academic researchers, entrepreneurs, policy experts, insurance experts, and patients will facilitate discussions on scientific, technical, and policy matters in healthcare. We must ensure that immersive healthcare can create a more precise, accessible, and effective assessment, treatment, diagnosis, and therapy, making the world safer. So tomorrow morning, we will return at 9 a.m. PST with my co-host, Julia Scott, Director of Brain and Memory Care Lab, and both of us will start at 9:10, and then we have our opening keynote at around 9:30 p.m. a.m. PST. So please return back, and let's continue celebrating Metaverse Safety Week.